Today on the podcast, we're taking a look at films and TV shows that predicted the future. Whether it's a tech prediction, a thought about future society, or predicting the unpredictable, we're going to take a deeper look at these examples and see if they really were the first ones to come up with these ideas, and how accurate they turned out. We'll take a look at some early examples of predictions in media, some movies that take place in 2020, and of course, we'll talk about The Simpsons. My name is Goran from ScreenRant, and today I have one of the hosts of the Did Somebody Say Movies podcast, and a sound recordist for film and TV, my friend Nicholas Kosick. What's up, man?
Hey, Goran, I'm good.
Today, the show is all about movies and TV shows that predicted the future, and whether they presented an idea, a future invention, or an event in some way that actualized in the future. It happened, it actually happened out there. So here's just an amount of the randomness that's happened that has come true. Scrubs predicted that Bin Laden was in Pakistan in a throwaway joke.
Okay.
You have Back to the Future, Family Guy, Parks and Rec, a canceled show named Revolution that all had jokes or background gags about the Cubs winning the World Series. Right. And in the film Rookie of the Year, the recruit for the Cubs had a World Series ring on.
Uh-huh.
There's a show in 1987 named Second Chance that predicted that the year Colonel Gaddafi would die in is 2011.
No way.
In I Am Legend, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a Batman v Superman poster in the film.
Seriously?
Yeah, I forget where Will Smith's walking around the city, and in the background, I think it might be like the exact same logo too. It's like the Superman Batman emblem just like superimposed on top of each other. And I remember when I saw that movie, I think it came out in 2007 or something. Uh-huh. I remember thinking that was like a side promotion where it's like, oh, this is them letting us know that they're going to come out with this movie. And then we didn't get it. And then we did get it.
Well, yeah.
And then we didn't
Not very
get
well
it.
anyway.
I formed a thesis for this podcast, for this specific show.
Did you? I
feel like I'm back in school again, with like homework that Mrs. Kabobble, I brought in all my homework.
Bueller.
Bueller. All predictions from film and TV fall into one of three categories.
Okay.
So the first one is societal and cultural. These are your Truman Shows, your Dawn of the Deads, your Idiocracies. These are the movies where they kind of have a negative view of like the future of society plots, which usually it's the most accurate of all three. It's basically being a negative Nancy and being like, well, the future's going to be pretty bad, I don't know if that really counts a lot of the time, but we'll see.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I get that.
I can't think of a movie. Well, I can think of one, but I can't think of another movie where the future society being predicted at the end is a positive one. It's either all too like squeaky clean or like so far advanced for our human tastes that we dislike it or something.
Right. And I feel like there's something fun about watching dystopian futures. Like, you're sitting there and it's just like, haha, that's going to be us someday, but not now. Let's keep watching this
we're
movie.
Laughing, being like, haha, oh, Mad Max, like I can shower with as much water as I need right now. Yeah. And then, when we were making this podcast in 3020, we'd be like, Mad Max nailed it.
They were right on the money.
Spot on.
Thanks, Mel Gibson.
So the next one we have are your technologically advanced predictions. And these are, for the most part, mainly science fiction films and shows where a concept or idea that was featured is later on invented. And there are freaking tons of examples for this, like Gattaca, Jurassic Park, Star Trek, The Thunderbirds Show, Blade Runner, and like literally so many more science fiction things. Basically, a lot of science fiction ends up under this category, and I think it might be for the wrong reasons. That's my bone I'm going to pick later.
Interesting. I'm excited to hear this.
And lastly, can you think of like what would be a specific example? What do you think is something that was predicted in a movie? A piece of tech.
A piece of tech. Well, you have your classics. You have Star Trek again, Blade Runner. Yeah, there are tons of movies and TV shows out there that have predicted things. But again, what was that one movie with the smartwatch? It was like a detective. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, is it the TV show?
Maybe it was a TV show. Get
Smart, where like, isn't that, or like, doesn't...
Oh, you know what? No, but that's a great example as well. Get Smart. Yeah, there was so many cool stuff. I have yet to see a shoe phone That I'm excited for.
That's the other thing. Was that an Inspector Gadget? I can't remember if it was like I think Inspector Gadget had the glove that he would like extend the pinky. I swear to God, maybe it was on like, Think Geek 10 years ago, but I swear I saw a glove that like turned into a Bluetooth headset when you made that hand gesture. I don't know if I'm making this up right now.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, I know I've seen that somewhere before, but again, the cell phone shoe, that is the future.
Bring us the cell phone shoe. I want a freaking iPhone size 13.
Exactly.
And lastly, we have the unintentional predictions. These are the most interesting because unintentionally predicting something is literally magic. Like that's what a magic trick is, right? Like you're predicting the unpredictable.
Do you think it ever happens where like a TV show or a movie will predict the future accidentally, then it happens, and then afterwards they're like, yeah, we totally meant to do that?
So there's a lot of these shows that go on for so long that basically end up being predicted because of the mass quantity of things being created. It's not just because a show like The Simpsons has 600 episodes. It's that there's 600 other shows that each have their own episodes that something is bound to match up with reality. So a famous example of this is, have you seen the very first season of Black Mirror?
You know what? No, I haven't. I tried watching the first episode and I was like, oh, this is going to be a tough watch.
Well, this is the one in the very first episode of Black Mirror, and not the Netflix one, the OG one with my boy Charlie Brooker. In the very first episode, the Prime Minister is, through a series of ultimatums, forced into having sexual relations with a pig. And in real life, David Cameron, the British Prime Minister at the time, had placed a private part of his anatomy into the mouth of a dead pig as an initiation at a university.
David Cameron, alleging that while a student, he'd taken part in a bizarre initiation ceremony, during which he'd inserted his penis into the mouth of a dead pig. A statement I still can't believe I'm reading aloud on BBC television. Seriously, this is like dreaming while awake.
Did that really happen?
You know what the university was called?
What?
West Ham. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But the rest is true, though. I swear the rest is true.
I can't believe it. That's incredible.
I remember when that happened, that was one of those events where you were kind of like, whoa, what else is hiding in these shows that we don't really know if it came true or not? So that's a freaking prediction. So back to my thesis. My thesis is that a film or show can only claim to predict something if it had the intention of predicting it in the first place. And this just goes to what your point was earlier on where, I totally meant for that to happen.
Yeah.
You ever play a game of pool?
Oh, yeah. I love pool.
Love pool. You have to call where the 8-ball goes in. And there's nothing worse than when you're playing pool with people that don't know how to play pool and they'll just hit the ball.
Yeah.
And magically the balls will go into the pockets and they'll be like, yeah, I totally meant to do that. I don't count that as playing pool, and I don't count movies as predicting things that they take credit for it.
Okay, that's fair. I get that. I'm the kind of person who doesn't know pool well enough to be like, I'm just going to hit this ball. Oops, forgot to call it. And it's the same feeling you get when you forget to call Uno when you play Uno. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh. I haven't played Uno in so long, and I instantly went back into a PTSD of knowing that I'd forgotten to call Uno at some point or not when I only had one card.
Yeah, you get the sweats and the panic starts to settle
sweats. Oh, man. So basically, like calling where the 8-ball goes, your prediction should be pretty confident. You should have confidence in your prediction to say, this is what we do think is going to happen. And I think that's fair to say.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you can't shoot blindly and claim victory when you're right. So let's start off with the societal predictions.
The future is now! Soon every American home will integrate their television, phone, and computer. You'll be able to visit the Louvre on one channel, or watch female mud wrestling on another. You can do your shopping at home, or play Mortal Kombat with a friend in Vietnam.
So that was from The Cable Guy, and that film came out in 1996. And I think if you watch that clip, you're kind of going like, yeah, he's kind of right about everything he just said.
Dude, 100%. First of all, 1996 is the year I was born. Second of all...
You were 96?
I'm 96.
Oh, wow. I was 94, so I was going to be like, at least we have a little bit of the 90s knowledge.
Oh my God, you're older than me? Dear Lord. Well, hey man, honestly, like, just listening to it, it just sounds like everything that's happening right now. And, I mean, it's so spot on.
That was spot on, but here's something interesting. In 1996, that's when the film came out. And in 1994, there was the Sega Channel, which was a thing you hooked up with your Sega Genesis, I'm pretty sure, maybe Master System, and it let you play games online and you could download games. And Mortal Kombat was on that list of games you could play in 1994.
Okay.
In 1988, there's the Multivision, which is one of the earliest picture-in-picture televisions. They originally used it in the 50s for the Olympics, I'm pretty sure, having picture-in-picture, but this was one you could get at home and be able to put 2 different channels on the same screen. And in 1995, there was this like store, Amazon? I don't know. They sold books.
Did you say Amazon?
I said it's Amazon. I don't know how to pronounce it, but they were this tiny little store in 1995, and you could buy books from them online.
Never heard of it. That's crazy.
All the things that Jim Carrey was talking about in that clip were already happening at the time. But without that knowledge, you wouldn't really know how accurate a prediction that was. And this isn't me pulling flaws at the speech at all. And this is me saying that the reason these societal predictions tend to be so spot on is that the writers are self-aware enough to see what is currently being created and envision it in like a sudden expansion, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Jim Carrey, the future is now. Here's an example from me. The future is now. Your self-driving car will taxi others around while you sit at home and make money, you know? We don't have that right now, but I guarantee you in 15, 20 years we probably will, right?
That's a good prediction. You know what I'm predicting?
What are you predicting?
Smartphones. Hear me out. Smartphones on your shoe. And we're going to be able to walk around on our smartphones. It's going to be a thing. It's so convenient. I don't know why it hasn't happened yet, honestly.
And you got like a perfect spot to hold your gum the whole day too?
Dude, yeah, you just peel it off the front of your phone, stick it in your mouth, hop on a call. There you go.
That would only happen in the cleanest cities in the world. No one would want to answer a shoe phone in Toronto. No one wants to put that soul to their face.
No. That would not be a thing.
But you couldn't make it the other way around either. You can't put the laces to your face. The flat side has to go against your face.
Exactly. Yeah, it was simple ergonomics.
And that this is the beginning of the rest of the future now, that from now on there'll simply be all these robots walking around, feeling nothing, thinking nothing, and there'll be nobody left almost to remind them that there once was a species called a human being.
This clip, it equates how constantly bored New Yorkers are and they want to leave but aren't able to, and they're kind of creating their own prison where they're both, in fact, the guards and the prisoners at the same time, and they're self-perpetuating their own boredom. And this is great because when you do watch this, you feel like that a lot of what they're saying is carrying true to now, even though they're not saying anything definite. It's kind of more like granding sweeps of guesses, and it's riding a fine line of a little okay boomer for me. I think it's like
boomer.
Yeah, it's so dire when these people talk about the future. That's why I have so much trouble coming up with any of these movies where they have some sort of a glimmer of hope for the future. It's always we're screwed, we're gonna be robots to our devices. There's never anything. I guess maybe WALL-E is one of the good ones, but even they go through their own apocalypse at some point.
True, WALL-E is a great example. I haven't seen this movie, I'll be honest, but just watching that clip, I was just like immediately hooked. I want to go see this. It's just kind of scary that, you see this from a bit of a different perspective, and like, I mean, there is some truth to it, and it's interesting, but like, again, this was what? 30 years ago, 40 years ago?
1981.
1981?
I mean, read what the title of the YouTube video is.
1981 film predicts the current state of the world. Oh my God.
They didn't put the name of they just picked the most kind of like, and here's the most clickbaity part of it all. And I think that while it's a great film, I think that having a society prediction, like a future society prediction being dire, that's like the original clickbait. Everyone's saying, oh, the future is going to be overrun with robots and AI. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of like the original clickbait where it's like, how bad can it be? Versus like the only film I can think of where at the end of it, there's a glimmer of hope for society is Snowpiercer. Have you seen Snowpiercer?
I haven't seen Snowpiercer.
It's this fantastic movie where basically at the back of the train is the poorest of the people and the front of the train is the richest. And because of climate change, it's too cold to go outside. This train perpetually goes around over and over and never stops. And at the end of the film, they get out and see some polar bears and you realize there is a little bit of hope for humanity. The cold isn't as bad as we thought it was, and there's animals alive outside. And that film did terribly at the box office. No one saw it. It was abysmal out there. And I felt so bad because it was so freaking good.
But that also came from Bong Joon-ho, right?
Oh, with that.
Director of Parasite?
That's it had Chris Evans in the movie too, and it tanked.
Right.
Like, everything was against that movie. Versus, what's a movie that has a messed up future society that you can think of, where people are so encumbered they have 12 hours to do whatever illegal things they want? Those Purge movies make gangbusters because everyone just wants to see America at its absolute worst.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're ignorant.
So, another example of societal predictions, we got George A. Romero inventing the zombie genre in 1968 with Night of the Living Dead. And what's great about this movie, first of all, is that it looks way older than it has any right to look. This film was made in 1968. It looks like it was made in the 40s. Like, it was made with, like, the scans now look fantastic, but if you were watching this growing up on the it was a publicly free domain movie that anyone could see, so you'd always see it in, like, the absolute worst quality. So it kind of blew my mind, first of all, to find out that it was made in 68. And what's interesting is that film historians say that the film was an allegory for the Vietnam War, which is funny because the messages seem to have been lost or skewed with the later zombie movies. It's kind of like when people watch Wolf of Wall Street and go, oh yeah, I want to be just like Jordan Belfort. And you're like, well, you know, he defrauded so many people, and the film shows that ignoring the law can lead to a lot. And people are like, let's buy some lewds, man. Let's party.
He's out there living his best life, you know?
Exactly. No matter how protective you are of your art, it's not up to you to decide how other people interpret it. So much like George Romero kind of creating these zombies that have been always associated with kind of lifeless shoppers and such, maybe didn't start originally from there, which adds on to your point of, did they want that to be their message, or are they applying someone else's message to something they've created?
Right. That's a good point.
In 1978, we have Dawn of the Dead, and this is George Romero commenting how no one talks to each other and we're all mindless wallets walking around malls spending our money. And this is an interesting prediction because this is one of the only predictions that comes and goes within our lifetime. The film came out in 78, and malls were kind of at their peak there, a little bit more towards the 90s. You had films like Mallrats, where Kevin Smith's talking about how people just hang out in the mall. It was the place to be. There's AC, there's food. You may not have had internet at home back then, so you're kind of just hanging out there all day. So the thing about Dawn of the Dead is that he made a comment about how these malls were people buying and spending their money there. Malls don't really exist anymore. They've been in decline drastically and have been closing down, and plazas have been closing down. People just don't go to the mall anymore.
What are electrolytes? Do you even know?
It's what they used to make Brondo.
Yeah, but why did they use them to make Brondo?
Because Brondo's got electrolytes.
This is too funny. I love this.
We have Idiocracy, which I think strikes a perfect balance between accurate predictions and kind of throwing everything up and seeing what sticks. And this movie was made by Mike Judge, who is the god of relatable humor. He's done Office Space, King of the Hill, Silicon Valley, Extract. So here's, in my opinion, this film is less about Mike Judge trying to predict what the future could look like in a this is your future way, and more so in a wouldn't it be crazy if way. And then that way, when these predictions do come true, they're like way more shocking. So obviously the big one is that Terry Crews plays President Camacho, who's this like hyped up, crazy. It's Terry Crews. It's just Terry Crews is playing Terry Crews. And a lot of people equate this to the Trump presidency, but I think it speaks to just more than that. Have you heard that like The Rock, Oprah, and Kanye West have all talked about wanting to run for president or been rumored to?
Oh boy, have I. Kanye 2020, baby.
Yeah, and to think that in 2006, we were thinking that, Mike Judge was thinking like, okay, what's the craziest thing we could have in president, as a president, this crazy gun-toting, hillbilly psychopath almost. And it's interesting because all you have to do in his situation is predict something so ludicrous that anything that remotely resembles it, people will think you predicted it, Now it's time to put on our engineer caps.
Oh, hold on. I'm just going to grab my engineer cap 1 second.
Yep, okay.
There we go.
Does it still fit?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. Because it's time to take a look at the technological predictions in media. If you look at it close enough, technology predictions have been in the media for hundreds of years. Entire genres of things are dedicated to showing how much people knew in the past. There's that one guy, the guy with his hands up in the air. He's like doing a jumping jack, the Da Vinci Code guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Didn't that predict that like we could fly or something? Da Vinci was always predicting things that we didn't know.
Yeah, he was a bit of a trailblazer in the Renaissance. Yeah.
So for the technological predictions, I want to hit you with a question real quick.
Okay, I like questions.
What's the first film or show that you can remember that had some form of video conferencing?
That had some sort of video conferencing. Well, I want to say Star Trek. That would be the obvious choice, I think, for me. But also 2001: A Space Odyssey had the same thing. And that movie, came out in the 70s, I think?
Here, let me hit you with one.
Hit me.
What about the ending of The Wizard of Oz?
Oh, wait a minute.
The wizard is shown to have been projecting himself as this like giant god, and they kind of pulled the curtain over, and he's just like a feeble old man who's been projecting his voice and image, tricking them the entire time.
Totally forgot about The Wizard of Oz. That is a perfect example of that. Oh my God.
But does this count as a prediction? And can you discredit Star Trek and all these other predictions just because they weren't the very first to do so?
Okay. All right. So I would say, judging by Gorian logic, I don't think it was intentionally trying to predict the future in that regard. But it just so happened to, accidentally predict holograms. And we are seeing that technology now, and it's super cool, might I add. But I totally forgot about The Wizard of Oz. I would say it isn't intentional, but I would say that technological shows like Star Trek or 2001: A Space Odyssey were more of the pioneers of that kind of thing.
Because they didn't... So my theory is that a lot of these things, so like take video conferencing, for example... Back when these films were coming out, you could still call someone on the telephone and have that sort of direct conference with them. But you're making Star Trek and you're talking to the Borg or, one of the other aliens out there, and they're just talking on the phone. And that's not really like interesting visually. So as a creator, what do? You want to be able to see both the actors talking back and forth. So why don't they have a phone call, but they can see each other at the same time? It's kind of these plot things that helped make it a visual medium for people to watch at home, while at the same time predicted things that were kind of inevitable to happen. He's talking about how at the beginning there's so much stuff that you could invent that, Wizard of Oz, we need the guy to talk to someone. It's a big projection that's happening in the background, The necessity early in the days was much, much easier.
That makes perfect sense, actually. And I mean, in a vein of like content creation as well, for example, I just had this thought, like, if you were to make something so completely original, like not knocking anything else off, not borrowing from anything else, I feel like it would either be insanely experimental and difficult to watch or just unwatchable, period. Like, what would it be?
They do say that all stories follow, a handful of those original stories, the hero's journey, etc., the rest of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally get it where, and you know what, I guarantee you if you did invent your 100% own original thing, someone would come out and say, hey, this predicted this thing, or like you stole this from this thing. I think there's just so much out there that it's constantly overlapping.
Oh, exactly. I think it's just safe to assume that everything's already been done, so just do it different. I don't know. Exactly.
And so looking back at these video chats, there was always broadcasting happening, and there's always very rural implementations of video chatting, or it was more like audio with still image, and it can be dated back to the 1930s in Germany. In 1956, AT&T created the first picture phone prototype, and you could make a video call on it. And in 1964, the first transcontinental video call between two venues happened. You could make a call at Disneyland for 10 minutes, and it would be in black and white and at 30 frames per second.
No way.
Yeah, it's like you're watching The Hobbit on like an old portable camping TV or something.
Pass.
Yeah, hard pass. And so you can see how I'm kind of conflicted in saying that some of these films and TV shows predicted something when the seeds for a lot of these ideas were planted elsewhere, and it's less of a prediction and more of a super heavy inspiration.
True.
Films like Aliens, Blade Runner, and 2001 all had some form of video conferencing. And I'm going to go through a whole list of famous predictions, and we're going to see whether or not we agree with whether or not they predicted it, quote unquote.
Hit me with those bullet points, Gorian.
All right. We got the Jetsons in 1962, and they had Rosie the Robot made. And in 2002, the iRobot Roomba came out. What do we think?
I remember that. I don't think so. I think that might be a situation of like, life recreating art.
Yeah, we could do one aspect of it, because if someone promised me a maid and left me a Roomba, I'd be like, can this thing cook a lunch or something? I don't know. The maid in the Jetsons was always making them food and whatnot.
That's true.
Yeah. There was a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in 1979, and you probably heard this term before, Babel Fish.
I actually haven't heard Babel Fish. What's Babel Fish?
We used it to translate French back in the day in high school. It was like a conversion website for translating languages. And a Babel Fish in the Hitchhikers is placed into the ear and can translate unknown languages. Star Trek had something similar in 1966 called the Universal Translator, which was an AI matrix capable of decoding and translating unknown languages. And last year, the Google Assistant interpreter mode, they had the Google Assistant where you could put a little earbud in your ear and it would translate in real time when someone was talking to you. And I know there's a lot of apps now where you can kind of take your phone and put it in front of like a menu or something, and it'll, glitchalize a little bit and then instantly translate everything into whatever language you want. Do you think this is accurate? Do you think that these sort of language interpreters would count?
You know what? I think technology was kind of bound to go in that direction anyway. And although it is cool that you could see what it might look like back in 1965 or something with Star Trek or whatever. I don't know if it was necessarily predicting. I think it was a glimpse into the future.
It definitely was a glimpse. And here's my beef. They translate unknown languages.
Oh, interesting.
The translators we use, they already have the languages programmed into them. I want something that can point at an ant, and it would be like, I'm hungry. And then you go and point it at like a butterfly, and it's like, I gotta fly, and point at a dog. I want the unknown language translator.
That's what I want, is a collar for my dog or something that says, hey, squirrel. That's it. That's all I want.
So we had Back to the Future 2 that had smart glasses and watches. And now we have Apple Watches and Google Glass, although they discontinued it. It was a failed technology, so can we really say it was predicted?
True, that is a good point. Although I was having a conversation with somebody recently about Google Glass, and I was like, I don't know what happened to it. It was a cool idea.
It's a shame
it's gone.
It
really
just
totally went away.
It was everywhere, I guess, in 2013, and then I was looking forward to buying a very cheap used version for like $50 on Craigslist or something, because I did think that the directions, when you're navigating around a city or something, like, sure, if you're wearing Google Glass, you're basically wearing like a sign that says, hey, please rob me right now.
Exactly.
But I think it would be cool for like maybe cyclists or basically when you're using your hands constantly and you also need to navigate. I think there's something there. And if you do watch the Back to the Future bit, they're doing such mundane things with the watches and glasses that it kind of does perfectly represent the little capabilities that the phones and watches and glasses have now. Like, you could only really do text messages and maybe some recording and whatnot. And that's all they were doing on like Back to the Future. They weren't doing anything so insane that it was like beyond the capabilities. It was, you can text with your glasses on.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Can I share a little tidbit of information with you?
Yes.
My dear Gorian. I recently, and this is the coolest thing I think I've ever bought in my life, I bought a VR headset.
Whoa, which one?
It's the Oculus Go. So it's like the low range model, but it's relatively affordable and it's so much fun. And in terms of watching like 360 videos and playing 360 games, it does more than what you need it to do. And it's just the future. It literally is the future, I think.
So VR is without a doubt one of those things that when you do try it, it kind of instantly clicks and you go, this is the next big thing. Like, this is what people are going to want to do. I have a PSVR and I can't stop putting it on people's heads when they come into my apartment. I think everyone should experience it. And I totally get the motion sickness aspect part of it, but I'm fully into it. I have a racing wheel and pedals and I have a VR headset and I'll do like a VR racing game on PlayStation and it's truly incredible. And the one thing that even movies today can't get right is the VR. Did you watch Ready Player One?
I did see Ready Player One, yeah.
It was very confusing because you'd think they would nail the VR aspect of it, but these people would like put on VR headsets in the game and then like run around, but then they're standing still. And then they showed some people have those like treadmills where they can run around endlessly. It was very confusing when they were moving in the game, because wasn't it supposed to be like a one-to-one thing? You move your hand up in real life, your hand moves up in the game.
Exactly. That was the idea. I kind of feel like Steven Spielberg made a movie about VR headsets without actually wearing one.
That's the most accurate thing I've heard all day. That man, he probably put on a VR headset and was like, no, just make it whatever you want when he puts it on, you know?
Oh, I'm dizzy. Oh.
He was so encumbered by it.
Yeah.
Oh, man. And that's the thing, too. A lot of these VR things that came out in the past that predicted it, their implementations of VR are so much more advanced than we're ever going to be able to get to. There's that terrible Stephen King adaptation of The Lawnmower Man, where basically any movie where they go into a virtual reality, you're like, it's not really like that nowadays.
But you know what? It is cool to see like their future interpretations of what VR might be, you know?
Yeah, here's what our perfect dream would be. And it's always the dream that's so good, you're like, yeah, I'd live in VR at that point.
Honestly, yeah, I'm considering it right now.
So then in 1999, there's this film, I've never seen it, but it's called Smart House. And it's about an AI known as Pat that could respond, clean, cook, control lighting, security, entertainment, etc. And basically...
Is he related to Hal?
I remember... surely everyone must have gotten like half of their film knowledge just from episodes of Recess, because I remember they had that Hal thing years before I ever watched 2001. I remember when you're a kid and you're like, oh wow, they're making fun of the Recess episode. You get it all backwards. But nowadays, I don't know if you've ever met a smart person. You might be a smart person.
Never met one in my life. No.
They love telling you what they can control from their phone. This light, I can turn it on and off from my phone. This thermostat here, control it from my phone. I had someone tell me they can turn on their slow cooker from their phone.
That's impressive. I gotta say, that is one I did not expect.
Your smart slow cooker will automatically appear as a Wi-Fi network.
What? When in your life would you ever fill up a slow cooker with food and then delay the slow cook? It's mind-boggling to me that there's so many things that you can do with your phone now that the second you crack and break your phone, you probably won't even be able to get into your apartment. I guarantee you there's some sort of phone lock app you can get.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it at all. And we are becoming more and more integrated with these things, and it's kind of crazy to just take a step back and realize that. But you know what scares me is if I have a smart home one day that's hooked up to a smart thermometer or a smart thermostat and like smart locks and I don't know, smart party lights. What if somebody hacks into my house? Like, do you think my house could try to kill me?
I mean, we've all seen the Fate of the Furious. All those cars got virtually apprehended. But that's a possibility. Some of these cars being made now can be shut down.
Yeah.
I think it was, we were talking about this earlier in Ready or Not, when she's driving away, they call the OnStar system and the OnStar guy just shuts down the car despite her having the key and everything.
Yeah. I don't want that to happen to me. Seriously, if I'm robbing a bank, I need my getaway car to be reliable. I don't need OnStar shutting it off. Like, come on.
Yeah, nowadays they'll just hit a button and your car will just drive itself to the prison.
It's just like it self-destructs. Like,
all right, let's go back in time though. Let's go a bit further back in time.
Are we gonna go back to the future?
We're gonna go back to the past and then to the future.
Oh, okay.
And then maybe like the 70s or 80s, and then we'll go back to the future. So,
okay, cool.
In 1966, we have Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 by Francois Truffaut. And in this film, they had something called Seashells, which are thimble radios that you would put in your ears, and you would basically hear ocean of sound, music, and talking. And in 1966, the closest thing to personal audio were radios, and headphones did exist, but they were the big, clunky, bulky, over-ear ones.
Right.
But then you start thinking again, is it really that crazy to think that within 30 years, they're going to make tiny little speakers that you can just kind of plop in your ears? I mean, they'll keep making them smaller and smaller, wouldn't they?
Exactly. It's not unrealistic at all to think that, the technology that's there will get smaller and more efficient.
Exactly. And it's one of those things that shows how, while they did in fact predict that people will be using, earphones, it's also, they had such an extreme understanding of what they had there. Rad Bradbury? What's his name?
Baba.
Ray Bradbury. Right, Bradbury? The guy knew what he was writing about.
Yeah.
Let's go back even further now and talk about an even simpler idea. Androids.
Are you talking about the phones or actual androids?
I'm talking about the frickin' robots that walk around.
Okay. All right.
So you have 1927, Metropolis.
Oh, we are taking it way back.
A mad scientist, he creates a robot version of another character in the film named Maria, and he is built to crush a workers' revolt that's ensuing. And this may not be the first film to have a robot, but it's one of the earliest and most famous examples. Like, I'm sure you could always pick out a film and say, that's the first robot. Yeah, okay, well, it wasn't Metropolis. I'm sorry. Like, Metropolis had sets. Metropolis had everything. It was a big film. And I think it's one of the oldest films to make a prediction that can still come true. But there's one film that is so old that has the best prediction, I'd say.
Hit me. What is it?
It's Le Voyage dans la Lune in 1902, better known as A Trip to the Moon.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, that's right. Oh, Goran, you're hitting me with so many nostalgic moments here.
So much I'm telling you, man, 1902.
Yeah.
This is one of the, not first films to predict, one of the first films. And there are older videos available, but this really felt like a film. There were props, there were special effects, there was extras, location changes. It had the works.
Yeah.
And do you remember how to pronounce his name? George Mayu? George Mayu?
Mayu?
George M.
Yep, that's it.
George M.
Yep. Oui.
George M. was half a century ahead in his prediction because we didn't end up going to the moon until 1969.
Not 1970, but a year sooner.
And do you know what happened the year after A Trip to the Moon came out in 1903?
What happened?
The Wright brothers invented the first airplane. I'll give you a last movie to finally get us from the technological into the unintentional because it goes right between the two of them.
He doesn't know how to use the 3 seashells.
So Demolition Man is about Sylvester Stallone as a cop bringing in a criminal played by Wesley Snipes, and due to the case, they're both frozen in a cryogenic prison. This was made in 1996, but at the beginning of the film, there's a little opening where you see Sylvester Stallone's character chasing down Wesley Snipes, and it's kind of like it's basically RoboCop. It's LA on fire. They call him Demolition Man because every time he brings in a perp, he blows up something. So they freeze him, and in those 36 years, this incredible utopia suddenly springs out of the ground where people don't swear, they don't do violence. There's a history of violence wing in a museum they go to later on. You're charged for swearing, and Taco Bell wins the fast food wars.
Okay, wait a minute. Hold on. Already, you said Taco Bell wins the fast food wars. Not buying it. But... like, this just sounds so absurd to me that I don't think we'll ever get to this point. At least hopefully not. But
well, a lot of people do say that the whole PC culture thing was kind of coming up in that. It is very funny to see Sylvester Stallone just lay off a bunch of very mild swears and rack up his credits in his little ticket system.
Yeah.
But there is one thing that this film predicted that is so bonkers that it just lands in the unintentional category.
Okay.
They wake up Snipes in a prison, and he escapes and ends up basically like using violence against people that don't know how to use it. And Stallone plays the straight man reacting to the world around him.
Right.
And the film actually had a futurist work with them while they were making the movie as a tech consult. So there's this futurist named Amy Webb who's a tech consultant for future tech in movies and TV. And she had this to say about Demo Man. We already had sort of the beginnings of smartphones, and there were experimentation happening with haptic screens. So a lot of those signals were already there. I think they got a lot of the technology spot on. And, you know, really some of the best science fiction and some of the best films and television shows that are set in the future tend to be those that aren't fantastical, but instead take a very pragmatic approach because they want to create a very realistic vision of the future. Really, it's no different from the work that I do with the government and enormous companies who are trying to create their strategies. Pretty interesting that they had this futurist kind of come on this goofy Stallone flick and kind of say, yeah, we kind of do the same thing with the government. We kind of know what the next 20 years are going to be like. Here's a little sprinkling of technology for you to use.
Yeah, that's awesome. I honestly, if I make a movie about the future, I 100%
I'm
work
definitely
with a futurist. Did you know that will.i.am is also a consultant in that regard?
No, for what? Not a tech consultant.
No, but like a futurist in a way. He's like worked with Coca-Cola and a bunch of other companies I've heard.
But what is he especially like in music?
No, just like future stuff. Yeah.
That's insane. William?
Huh. Bill, I am. Yeah.
Clearly didn't do that deep of a dive if I didn't find that out. But while Demolition Man ranked true for those first two categories with its societal and tech predictions, here's one that it didn't predict. So in the film, Wesley Snipes goes to prison, and in 2008, Wesley Snipes was sentenced to 3 years in prison for willful failure to file federal income tax returns.
Huh. No kidding.
He went to jail for 3 years for not doing his taxes. That's, well, the most gangster thing you can do, first of all.
That's hilarious.
But also, one of those moments where you're like, wow, they knew, they predicted it. Like that, you kind of get a little tingly where you're like, oh yeah, that did happen, didn't it?
You get that little ooh inside.
Exactly,
you know?
a little shiver where you're like, is this all part of someone's plan out there? It kind of gives you that idea that there's maybe some creator out there, probably like the, what's his name? The guy from The Simpsons, the main guy.
Homer?
No, the creator.
Oh, Matt Groening.
Yeah, Matt Groening's probably God and just like controlling everything with the multiple shows he has going on. Then we get to The Simpsons, and there's so many for The Simpsons. So I'm just going to rapid fire through a bunch of these, all right?
Yeah, please hit me.
All right, here we go. We have the censorship of Michelangelo's statue of David by Russian campaigners voting on whether or not to clothe a copy of the statue or not. We have Siegfried and Roy tiger attack, horse parts found in food. There's a really funny one where Martin's using a Palm Pilot and he has autocorrect on, and the bullies steal it and put in beat up Martin, but it spells eat up Martha. And it's one of my favorite jokes in The Simpsons, and I can't believe that joke is from 1994.
Right.
The year I was born, that joke came out. I remember watching this episode thinking that it was like surely from 1999 or 2000 when like iPods were coming out, but they were really ahead of it.
How do they know?
You have Disney buying 20th Century Fox, faulty voting machines. They predicted the winner of 3 Super Bowls. They predicted that people would sell groomed ferrets under the guise of a toy poodle.
What?
You have Canada legalizing weed. You have mutated vegetables. You have crooks stealing and selling grease. You have FIFA scandals. And some of these examples are them predicting things, and then some of them are stories happening in real life that kind of just sound exactly like one of the plots. So a lot of the ones like the toy ferrets and the grease ones are criminals that just happen to be doing the same thing that The Simpsons did.
Okay. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Exactly. So here's what Al Jean had to say about this. They asked him about it, and he said, I predict people will make too much of our great predictions. Which is great. I made a whole podcast about it, but thanks, Al.
Thanks, Al.
When that many people, or when that many smart people produce a television show, it's bound to make some startling predictions. And the show was written by really smart people. A lot of people from Harvard, a lot of mathematicians and stuff working on the show. If you ever listen to the commentaries, it's crazy how many jokes were worked into it. And I think one of the ones that they predicted that no one mentioned on their list was there's a joke where they moved to Canada and Bart attends a school in Canada, and on the front sign outside, there's a website for you to go to the school. I think it was just like www.theschoolsname.com. And the joke was that they were talking about how it was so ludicrous that a school would have a website all for itself, and that would be such a waste of the internet back then to have that. And it's kind of come and gone so far, and they comment on it being like, now there's websites for everything. So this joke is kind of just like gone over so many people's heads.
Right. Do you think it's them predicting the future, or do you think it's more of them just looking at the likelihood of things?
So there's 2 theories about this. There's one that's a concept by this Harvard mathematician called Frederick Mosteller and Percy Diaconis. And this is from 1989. And this law states that with a large enough sample size, anything can happen. It's the longest running scripted TV series in history. And not to get too smart, but there's this book called Connecting with Coincidence that Dr. Bernard Beatman wrote. And he says under the right conditions, we can know things that we don't know we know, and we can sometimes predict events or attract what we are thinking.
Oh my God. Yeah. You know, sometimes we just know what we know, and then you don't even know that you know this thing, you know?
Yeah, I know.
That might be the stupidest thing I've ever said.
But also the smartest thing you've ever said.
Exactly.
That's what we can really take away from this. What can we say about things that predicted the future? Should we always look for the earliest example of something like video conferencing and pinpoint to like one film and say, all right, that's the film. They got it earliest, you know, they get to have the privilege of saying they predicted it? Or do we look at the films that best interpreted it and kind of have the most sound understanding of it? I think one of the most level-minded, what am I looking for? The most likely future that we are headed towards is the future we see in the movie Her. It's kind of like Future Light in the sense that, we don't have flying cars and whatnot, but everything's a little bit more automated. There's a lot more interaction with these AIs. And I think that's kind of like the closest thing that we're heading towards.
Yeah. And you know what? That's actually one of the things that kind of scares me the most when it comes to these films and TV shows that predict the future, allegedly, is the ones that that aren't far-fetched enough to be like, oh, that's like 100 years away. It's not a big deal. But the ones like Her, where it's just slightly more advanced than things are now, in the sense that this could be reality in 5 to 10 years,
Exactly. It is those things. Yeah, you are watching Black Mirror every now and then. You're like, ooh, they're making it just futuristic enough that you're not watching like Blade Run, and you're like, yep, they're drinking, blue milk and whatever, and they're drinking sci-fi things, versus like, oh no, this will be you in like probably 30 years, and you're going to fall in love with an AI. That's what I'm worried about. So to finish this episode off, I just wanted to take a look at some movies and shows. All right, they're all movies, but things that may not have predicted anything, but took place in the year 2020.
Okay.
All right, so here's 5 movies that took place in 2020, and we're going to pick which one's the closest.
I'm so excited. Okay.
All right, so we have Edge of Tomorrow, a.k.a. Live, Die, Repeat, a.k.a. Well, what's the third name?
I can't remember, but it's
there's a third name. They have
Tom Cruise does robot stuff. That's what it's called.
Yeah, it's Tom Cruise Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
So we have him living the same day over and over again. But, that could be like a Sims thing, maybe. You're like forcing. It's like watching those computer algorithms that will do the same sorting task over and over, and after like the 5th or 6th time, they learn how to do it. You ever see those videos of like the animated robots that don't know how to walk, and it's like cycle 20, cycle 50, and by like the 100th cycle, they're running down the street like the Terminator guy with the razor blade hands.
Oh God, yeah, I shudder. But yes.
Another movie, Real Steel. Hugh Jackman. I'd never seen the whole thing, but it's Rock'em Sock'em Robots with Hugh Jackman, I think.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I don't know if when Hugh Jackman's fighting and the robots are like replicating his moves, does he get hurt? Does he get hurt when the robot gets hurt? I don't understand how it works.
I'm not sure either, but this kind of gives me some Pacific Rim vibes, and I love Pacific Rim.
And there was a scene in Pacific Rim that took place in 2020.
Wait, really?
I think it was like when it's on the ice barge when one of the people in the ship passes away, one of their brothers dies or something. But I was looking on the list, and it was like a 20-second scene, but it did take place in 2020.
Interesting.
A Quiet Place.
Wait, is that 2020?
That A Quiet Place takes place in 2020.
Oh.
Yeah, I think there's a couple newspapers in there or something. And that's another one of those things where, as a production designer, you're working the movie. What year should we put the newspapers? I put 2020,
Yeah.
It'll come up in a couple of years. It'll be cute. Yeah. I do think a lot of these movies do that sort of thing where, Back to the Future, how do we make it relevant? Put that they go to 2015 so that in 40 years or 50 years, you have a guaranteed relapse of the film.
Right. And that's a smart way to go about it as a studio, I got to say.
100%. Reign of Fire takes place in 2020.
Haven't seen it.
Fantastic movie. It's basically an apocalypse movie that happens right now, and it's with dragons. So it's basically what would happen if dragons were real, but also we had everything else, like we had guns and everything else there. And it's basically bright, but way better. There's a great scene where they're recreating Star Wars for like a bunch of kids sitting down, and they do the famous "No, I am your father" scene, and the kids are like, it blows their minds.
I am your father.
So there's, 50 movies for you to watch, and I guarantee you we missed a bunch of them. I guarantee you there's a bunch of the Simpsons ones that we don't even know have happened yet. But if you figure it out, please let us know in the comments. We definitely want to hear which ones we've missed and what things you think are going to happen in the future. Do you see any of these movies coming true? Are we going to have dream machines like in that other Jim Carrey movie? How many Jim Carrey movies will come true, do you think?
I want to say all of them. Starting with The Mask.
Somebody stop me!
And where can they find you, Nick?
Well, I'm with Did Somebody Say Movies, podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere you find your podcasts.
Awesome.
Check us out.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I predict that you will subscribe and leave a like and a comment on this video. I also predict that we will have resealable cereal bags one day. That's the future I want to live in.